I'm Ivy, 36 years old, living in Boston as a marketing executive. My world turned upside down when my husband of 8 years, Jackson, sent me a text message that shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. What he didn't realize was that his cruel message wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning of his downfall. He thought he'd won, but he had no idea what was coming his way. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, and stick around to see how I turned what seemed like the worst day of my life into the ultimate victory. I met Jackson at my friend Tara's housewarming party 10 years ago. I remember the moment clearly. I was standing by the window, sipping a glass of wine and admiring the view of the Boston skyline when he approached me with a confident smile. He was tall, well-dressed, with dark hair and the kind of charm that made conversation flow easily. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans for dinner the following weekend. Our first date was at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. Jackson worked in finance and had just landed a big client, so he was feeling celebratory. I was making my way up in the marketing world, having recently been promoted to account manager at a well-respected advertising agency. We clicked immediately, both ambitious, career-focused and with similar visions for the future. The chemistry between us was undeniable. Jackson was attentive, sending flowers to my office and planning thoughtful dates. Within 3 months, we were spending almost every night together, and after 6 months, he suggested we move in together. It felt fast, but also right. We found a beautiful apartment in Back Bay with hardwood floors and large windows that filled the space with natural light. The proposal came during a hiking trip to Vermont in the fall. We'd reached a scenic overlook after a challenging climb, and as I was taking in the breathtaking view of mountains painted with autumn colours, I turned around to find Jackson on one knee. The ring was stunning, a diamond solitaire on a platinum band that caught the sunlight perfectly. Through tears of joy, I said yes without hesitation. We married the following spring in a small but elegant ceremony with 60 of our closest friends and family. My parents flew in from California, beaming with pride as my father walked me down the aisle. Jackson's family came from Chicago, his mother dabbing at tears throughout the ceremony. We wrote our own vows, promising to support each other's dreams and stand together through whatever life brought our way. How ironic those words would become. Early married life seemed perfect. With our combined incomes, we were able to save for a down payment on a beautiful brownstone in an upscale Boston neighborhood. The day we got the keys, Jackson carried me over the threshold, and we spent the evening drinking champagne on the floor of our empty living room, planning how we'd make this house our home. Looking back, there were red flags I chose to ignore. Jackson insisted on joint accounts for everything, which seemed reasonable at the time, but he also insisted on managing our finances himself. When I would ask about investments or savings plans, he'd brush me off with comments like, "Don't worry your pretty head about it," or "That's why you married a finance guy to handle all this boring stuff." I should have pushed harder, but I trusted him completely. There were other subtle comments that should have alarmed me. When I'd talk about a work accomplishment, he'd say things like, "It's cute how excited you get about your little marketing campaigns." Or when I'd make a decision without consulting him, even something small like redecorating the guest room, he'd say, "You should have waited for me. I know how you get carried away sometimes." But we had created what looked like a perfect life from the outside. Our home was featured in a local lifestyle magazine. We hosted dinner parties for friends and colleagues, and we took luxurious vacations twice a year. I convinced myself that the occasional dismissive comment or controlling behaviour was a small price to pay for what seemed like a dream life. How wrong I was. The first 3 years of our marriage were relatively smooth. We settled into a comfortable routine, building our careers and our home together. In our 4th year together, I received a significant promotion to marketing executive, which came with a substantial raise and more responsibility. I was ecstatic, but Jackson's reaction was lukewarm at best. "That's great, babe," he said, barely looking up from his laptop when I told him the news. Just don't let it take too much of your time. You know how you get when you're stressed with work. I brushed off his response, attributing it to a tough day at his office. We celebrated at an expensive restaurant that weekend, but throughout dinner, Jackson steered the conversation away from my promotion and toward his own career aspirations. It was the first clear sign of his resentment, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. Our social circle consisted mainly of other professional couples. Brian and Tara, who had introduced us, remained close friends. My best friend Monica worked as a lawyer and had known me since college. She was single and focused on her career, which Jackson subtly disapproved of, often making comments about how she would settle down eventually when the right man came along. Monica always rolled her eyes behind his back, which made me uncomfortable but also secretly validated my own occasional doubts. As we approached our 5th anniversary, I began bringing up the topic of children. At 33, I felt ready to start a family, but Jackson always had a reason to wait. First, it was because he was up for a promotion. Then, it was because he wanted to make sure we had enough saved for the best schools. Later, it was because he thought we should renovate the 2nd floor of our home first to create the perfect nursery. "We have plenty of time, Ivy," he would say. "Let's enjoy being just us for a while longer." Around this time, Jackson suggested we purchase an investment property, a vacation condo in Cape Cod that we could rent out when we weren't using it. The idea made financial sense, and I agreed. However, Jackson insisted on handling all aspects of the purchase and management, adding another item to the long list of financial matters he controlled completely. As my career continued to advance, Jackson grew increasingly cold and distant. He would come home later and later, claiming long hours at the office. Weekend mornings that we used to spend lingering over coffee and the newspaper now saw Jackson rushing out for client meetings or golf with colleagues. The warmth and attention that had characterized our early relationship had all but disappeared. When friends or family would ask how we were doing, I found myself making excuses for his absence or behavior. "He's just so busy at work right now," I would say, or "finance gets crazy this time of year." I became adept at painting a picture of marital harmony that was increasingly at odds with reality. Our arguments grew more frequent, centering around our differing priorities. I wanted more quality time together, while Jackson seemed to want more freedom and independence. When I suggested couples counselling, he dismissed it as new age nonsense and accused me of creating problems where none existed. "If you were happier with yourself, you wouldn't need so much from me," he said, during one particularly hurtful argument. That statement lodged in my heart like a splinter, painful and impossible to ignore. Jackson's late nights became more frequent. The explanation was always work, but my instincts told me otherwise. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I had invested years in this relationship, in building our life together, and I wasn't ready to admit it might be crumbling. The first time I directly questioned our finances was after noticing several large withdrawals from our joint account. Jackson became immediately defensive, then dismissive. "I moved some money into investments," he said curtly. "Better returns. Nothing for you to worry about." When I pressed for details, asking which investments and why I wasn't consulted, his face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Do you not trust me now, after all I've done managing our money successfully for years?" His tone was cold and cutting. "Maybe you should focus more on your own job performance instead of questioning mine." I backed down, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, I felt afraid of my own husband, not physically, but afraid of what I might discover if I kept pushing. That night, as he slept soundly beside me, I lay awake wondering what else he might be hiding. The discovery process began with something so mundane it's almost laughable in retrospect. I was doing laundry when I found a receipt in Jackson's jacket pocket from a high-end jewelry store. The date on the receipt was from 2 weeks prior, nowhere near my birthday, our anniversary, or any other occasion that would warrant such a purchase. And I had received no jewelry. My heart raced as I studied the receipt. The amount was substantial, nearly $5,000 for a woman's bracelet. I put the receipt back exactly where I'd found it and tried to calm my racing thoughts. There could be an innocent explanation. Perhaps it was a gift for his mother or sister, maybe even a surprise for me that he was saving for a special occasion. But deeper down, I knew. The late nights grew more frequent. 3, sometimes 4 times a week, Jackson wouldn't arrive home until well after I'd gone to bed. The excuses varied. Client dinners, work emergencies, drinks with colleagues that ran late. Each time he smelled of expensive cologne that wasn't his, and sometimes a faint trace of perfume that definitely wasn't mine. His phone became an extension of his hand, and he guarded it jealously. If I entered a room while he was texting, he would quickly turn the screen away or put the phone down. He added a passcode that he never shared with me. Once, when his phone rang while he was in the shower, I glanced at the screen and saw a contact listed simply as A. When I mentioned the call later, his face flushed with anger. "Are you checking up on me now?" he demanded. "Going through my phone while I'm in the shower? That's a new low, Ivy." The accusation stung especially since I hadn't actually snooped. I'd merely seen a name on a screen, but his overreaction spoke volumes. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake for hours, listening to Jackson's steady breathing beside me, wondering who he had become, or perhaps who he had been all along. My work began to suffer as exhaustion took its toll. Dark circles appeared under my eyes, and I lost weight without trying as my appetite diminished under the weight of constant anxiety. During a rare weekend when Jackson was actually home, I gathered my courage and confronted him directly about my concerns. "I feel like you're pulling away," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You're never home. You're secretive about your phone, and whenever I ask about our finances, you shut down. What's going on, Jackson?" His response was a masterclass in gaslighting. He looked at me with a mixture of concern and condescension, as if I were a child having a tantrum. "Ivy, I think you need to talk to someone professionally. This paranoia isn't healthy." He reached out to pat my hand in a gesture that felt more patronizing than comforting. "I've been working incredibly hard to secure our future, and instead of appreciation, I get accusations. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel?" Somehow, he had turned my legitimate concerns into evidence of my own instability, making me the villain in our story. I retreated, questioning my own perceptions and intuitions. The following week, over lunch with Monica, I finally shared some of my concerns. Her reaction was immediate and unequivocal. "He's cheating, Ivy. All the signs are there." Her directness was both painful and oddly relieving. "You need to protect yourself. Have you considered hiring a private investigator?" The suggestion shocked me. A PI seemed so dramatic, so final, an admission that my marriage was beyond saving. I wasn't ready for that step, but Monica's certainty planted a seed that would later grow into action. "At least start documenting everything," she advised. "Dates, times, suspicious behavior, and for God's sake, get a copy of all your financial records. Something doesn't feel right there either." Her words haunted me as I reviewed our credit card statements that evening, while Jackson was at yet another work dinner. I discovered charges at upscale restaurants on nights he'd claimed to be working late at the office, hotel charges in Boston when he had no reason to stay at a hotel in the city where we lived, and most alarmingly frequent charges from businesses in Miami, a city Jackson had mentioned visiting for work only once. A few days later, I overheard part of a phone conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions. I had come home early from work with a migraine and was lying down in our bedroom when I heard Jackson enter the house. He must have assumed I wasn't home because he spoke freely, his voice carrying up the stairs. "I miss you too, baby. I know just a few more weeks, and we can stop all this sneaking around. She doesn't suspect anything. Yes, I've been moving the money gradually so she won't notice. I promise by summer we'll be together in Miami." When he realized I was home, he quickly ended the call. The look on his face when he saw me standing at the top of the stairs was brief but telling. a flash of panic quickly masked by casual indifference. "Client call," he said smoothly. "Big potential investor." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I contacted a financial advisor recommended by Monica, someone with no connections to Jackson or his firm. I needed to understand exactly what our financial situation was before I made any moves. When Jackson announced an unexpected business trip to Miami, the following week, the pieces began falling into place. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated exit strategy. He was planning to leave me, and from what I'd overheard, he was already moving our money in preparation. The night before his trip, as we lay in bed with the gulf of betrayal stretching wide between us, I fought an internal battle. Part of me wanted to confront him, to scream and demand the truth, but a calmer, more strategic voice advised patience. If he was indeed planning to leave and take our money, confronting him prematurely would only accelerate his plans before I was prepared. So I kissed him goodbye the next morning, wishing him a productive trip, all while my heart hammered in my chest and bile rose in my throat. As soon as his car pulled away, I called the financial advisor and scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon. What I learned in that meeting changed everything. Not only had Jackson been making regular transfers from our joint accounts to an account in his name only, but he had also taken out a second mortgage on our home without my knowledge, forging my signature on the documents. The amount of money at risk was staggering, nearly everything we had built together over 8 years. "You need to act quickly," the advisor told me, "and you need a good lawyer." That evening I began the process of securing what assets I could and documenting Jackson's financial deceptions. It was a race against time, and I had no idea how much time I had left. What I didn't expect was that Jackson would make his move so soon and in such a cowardly way. I remember that morning with painful clarity. It was a Tuesday in April, unseasonably warm. I had slept poorly, as had become my norm, but forced myself out of bed for an early morning run to clear my head. The streets of our neighborhood were quiet cherry blossoms beginning to bloom along the sidewalks. Spring, a time of renewal that felt cruelly at odds with my crumbling marriage. When I returned home sweaty and slightly more scented, I checked my phone as I sipped water in the kitchen. That's when I saw it. A text from Jackson sent just minutes earlier. "Ivy, I'm not coming home. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with Amanda. She's 20 gorgeous and doesn't nag me constantly. I've already emptied our joint account surprise, over $300,000 gone, so don't bother checking. Consider this official notice of divorce. My lawyer will be in touch. Ha ha. Good luck starting over at your age." The water glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the tile floor. The sound barely registered as I read and reread the text, each word a physical blow. The casual cruelty, the mocking tone, the clear intent to leave me financially devastated. Amanda, 20 years old, our joint account emptied. My hands trembled as I navigated to our banking app. He wasn't lying. Our main joint account, which had held our emergency fund and savings, showed a balance of $42.17. The transaction history showed a transfer of $327,000 to an external account the previous day while Jackson was still in Miami. The room seemed to spin around me. I gripped the edge of the counter, fighting waves of nausea. My knees gave out and I sank to the floor, heedless of the broken glass. For several minutes I couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the roaring in my ears and the violent churning in my stomach. Then something shifted. Beneath the shock and devastation, a calm clarity emerged. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was a declaration of war. And despite Jackson's clear belief that he had won the first battle decisively, he had no idea what was coming. With hands that no longer shook, I typed a response. Good luck. Just those 2 words. No pleading, no anger, no questions. I knew it would infuriate him far more than any emotional outburst. Jackson had always derived satisfaction from provoking emotional reactions from me, especially in recent years. Denying him that satisfaction now was my first small victory. I called Monica immediately. Her legal mind would be invaluable, and I needed a friend. She answered on the second ring. "He's left me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Texted me that he's moving to Miami with a 20-year-old, and he's taken all the money from our joint account." Monica's gasp was audible. "I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there. Don't call him, don't text anything else. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, Monica arrived at my door 18 minutes later, still in her pajamas, with a jacket thrown over them, her hair in a messy bun. She hugged me tightly, then switched immediately to action mode, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Show me the text," she demanded, following me to the kitchen. I handed her my phone and her face darkened as she read. "What a complete and utter bastard. But Ivy," she looked up at me with a hint of a smile, "he's also an idiot." This text is gold for a divorce attorney. It shows intent to deprive you of marital assets. It's evidence of abandonment. It's practically a gift-wrapped admission of wrongdoing. As if on cue, my phone pinged with another text from Jackson. "Nothing to say, no begging me to come back, no asking where all your precious money went. Pathetic." Monica read it over my shoulder and snorted. "He's trying to get a rise out of you. Don't give him the satisfaction." My phone continued to ping throughout the morning. Jackson's texts grew increasingly angry and insulting as I maintained my silence. Each message was more incriminating than the last, and I saved them all. Telling my family was painful. My parents were shocked and furious. My younger sister wanted to fly to Boston immediately to be with me. Jackson's parents called after I texted them a simple message letting them know their son had left me. His mother was in tears. "We had no idea, Ivy. We're so ashamed. This isn't how we raised him." The genuine anguish in her voice moved me. They had always been kind to me, and I knew this revelation would devastate them. That first night alone in our home was surreal. I moved through the rooms, seeing evidence of Jackson everywhere. His books on the shelves, his favourite whiskey on the bar cart, his robe hanging in the bathroom. Objects that had been familiar and comforting now felt like artefacts from a stranger's life. I slept in the guest room, unable to face our bed. But before I attempted sleep, I made a list, a methodical, detailed list of every step I needed to take to protect myself and prepare for what was coming. Jackson thought he had won by emptying our joint account. What he didn't know was that I had been preparing for this possibility, however unconsciously, for months. And what he certainly didn't know was just how badly his impulsive, arrogant actions would backfire. As I finally drifted into an exhausted sleep, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The worst had happened. The uncertainty was gone. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and despite the pain, there was a certain freedom in that knowledge. The war had begun, but the final battle was far from over. 6 months before Jackson's devastating text, I had my first meeting with financial advisor Patricia Walsh. The meeting wasn't prompted by concrete suspicions of Jackson's infidelity, but rather by a growing unease about his increasing secrecy regarding our finances. It had started with a casual conversation at a women's networking event. The speaker, a divorced financial planner, had emphasized the importance of financial independence within marriage. Even in the healthiest relationships, she had said, each spouse should have some money that's theirs alone and full knowledge of all shared assets. Her words resonated with me, highlighting the vulnerability of my own position. Patricia's office was warm and inviting, with none of the intimidating corporate atmosphere of Jackson's financial firm. She listened carefully as I explained my situation, my complete lack of access to or understanding of our investments, Jackson's dismissive attitude when I asked questions, and my growing concern about his late nights and unexplained expenses. "Unfortunately, I see this situation situation more often than you might think, Patricia said, her expression serious. What I'm hearing raises several red flags. Let's start by getting a clear picture of what you know about your financial situation and then discuss how to protect yourself without escalating tensions at home. Over the next hour, I shared every financial detail I could access. Our joint account statements, property records, tax returns from previous years. Patricia took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When we were finished, she sat back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. Ivy, based on what you've shared, I'm concerned. There are gaps in these records that suggest funds may be moving to accounts you're not aware of. And the second property in Cape Cod, you should have more documentation about its financing than you do. She leaned forward. My advice is to take some protective measures immediately, even if everything turns out to be perfectly legitimate. Patricia outlined a strategy that felt somewhat cloak and dagger, but also empowering. First, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank than the one Jackson and I used, using my office address for all correspondence. Each month, I would transfer a small amount from my personal spending money into this account. Not enough for Jackson to notice, but enough to create a safety net over time. Next, I began quietly gathering and copying all financial documents I could access without raising suspicion, deed to our home insurance policies, investment statements that came in the mail tax records. I stored these copies in a secure cloud account that Jackson knew nothing about. Most significantly, Patricia helped me understand a crucial fact that Jackson had never revealed to me our family home, while in both our names had been purchased primarily with money I had inherited from my grandmother 3 years into our marriage. Under Massachusetts law, inherited assets, even if commingled to some degree, often retained their separate character in divorce proceedings. This meant the home that Jackson assumed was a joint marital asset might legally be considered largely mine. Your inheritance was substantial, Patricia noted, reviewing the original deposit records. Over 60% of the house purchase came directly from those funds. Jackson added his savings to reach the down payment amount, but the bulk was your inherited money. That's significant in divorce court. In addition to the home revelation, I discovered that my grandmother had left me another gift I'd never fully understood the significance of: a stock portfolio that Jackson had convinced me to let him manage alongside our other investments. According to Patricia, these stocks should have remained separate property. When we accessed the records, we discovered the portfolio had grown substantially over the years, and Jackson had never merged it with our joint investments as I'd assumed. It remained in my name, though, under his management. This is actually good news, Patricia explained. It means those assets remain legally yours. If he's been making good investment decisions with them, he's essentially been growing your separate property, not marital assets. With Patricia's guidance, I took control of this portfolio, changing the account access credentials without informing Jackson. He was so confident in my financial ignorance that he never checked these accounts himself, assuming I wouldn't touch what I didn't understand. The other crucial step I took was documenting Jackson's increasingly suspicious behavior. Every late night, every unexplained expense, every evasive answer about our finances, I recorded it all in a password-protected document, including dates, times, and exact quotes when possible. I began taking photos of receipts I found, logging unfamiliar credit card charges, noting the times and durations of his business trips. What started as precautionary measures became increasingly urgent as I uncovered more evidence of deception. 3 months before his final text message, I found documents for an LLC registered in Florida that listed Jackson as the sole owner. The LLC had purchased a luxury condo in Miami 6 months earlier, a transaction he had never mentioned, presumably funded with money from accounts I knew nothing about. Most damning of all, 2 months before he left, I discovered through our shared cloud storage, which Jackson apparently forgot, we both had access to a folder. containing explicit photos and messages between him and a young woman named Amanda. The timestamps on these exchanges went back over a year, and the content made it clear their relationship was serious and that they had plans that didn't include me. Rather than confronting Jackson with this evidence, I quietly forwarded everything to my separate email account and continued gathering information. If he was planning to leave me, as the messages suggested, I wanted to be prepared. I consulted with a divorce attorney recommended by Patricia, without formally retaining her services yet. The consultation confirmed what Patricia had suggested. I was in a stronger legal position than Jackson likely realized. 1 month before his text, I made my most significant move. Based on the attorney's advice, I transferred half of the remaining balance from our joint savings account, approximately $160,000, to my separate account. This was well within my legal rights as a joint account holder and spouse, and would protect at least some of our assets from whatever Jackson might be planning. I also secured a separate credit card in my name, only with a substantial limit based on my executive salary, ensuring I would have access to credit if needed. Every step was taken carefully, methodically, and most importantly, legally. By the time Jackson sent his cruel text message thinking he had left me destitute by emptying our joint account, he had no idea that I had already secured significant assets, documented his infidelity and financial deception extensively, and consulted with both financial and legal experts about my options. His text wasn't the devastating blow he intended, but rather the starting gun in a race he didn't realize we were running, and one where I had already covered significant ground before he even reached the starting line. 3 weeks after Jackson's text, I received a call from the attorney I had consulted earlier, Lauren Goldstein. "Your husband's back in Boston," she informed me. "His attorney just contacted me to set up a meeting to discuss divorce terms. Apparently, Jackson is willing to be generous despite your emotional instability and financial incompetence." I could hear the eye roll in her voice. "Are you ready to proceed with filing the counter-petition we discussed?" "Absolutely," I replied, a sense of calm determination settling over me. During the 3 weeks since Jackson's departure, I had officially retained Lauren as my attorney and worked with her to prepare a comprehensive legal response to whatever Jackson might throw at me. The documents were ready, just waiting for Jackson's return to Boston to be filed. 2 days later, Jackson strode into Lauren's office conference room with the swagger of a man who believed he held all the cards. His attorney, a slick corporate lawyer from his firm, looked equally confident. Jackson barely glanced at me, but when he did, I caught the flash of surprise at my composed appearance. Perhaps he had expected tears begging or visible signs of distress. Instead, he found me immaculately dressed in a tailored navy suit, sitting calmly beside Lauren with a stack of documents before us. "Let's make this quick," Jackson said, loosening his tie slightly. "I'm prepared to be reasonable about the division of assets despite the circumstances. You can keep your car and personal belongings, and I'll allow you to stay in the house for 3 months while you find an apartment you can afford on your salary." His condescending tone made my skin crawl, but I maintained my neutral expression. Lauren smiled thinly. "Before we discuss your generous offer, Mr. Pierce, we have some papers to serve you." She nodded to her assistant, who entered with an envelope, placing it before Jackson. "This is Mrs. Pierce's petition for divorce, citing abandonment, adultery, and financial misconduct. You'll also find a detailed forensic accounting report that documents the systematic misappropriation of marital funds over the past 18 months. Jackson's attorney reached for the envelope, but Jackson snatched it first, tearing it open. His face flushed, then paled as he scanned the first few pages. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Financial misconduct. You have no proof of anything. Page 12, Mr. Pierce," Lauren said calmly. "You'll find documentation of the Miami property purchased through your LLC. Pages 15 through 20 detail the systematic withdrawal of funds from joint accounts to your personal account at First Maritime Bank of Florida. Pages 21 through 30 document your expenditures on Ms. Amanda Wilson, including the $47,000 in gifts, the $5,000 bracelet from Tiffany's, and of course, the condo maintenance fees. Jackson's attorney leaned over to look at the papers, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "Jackson, we should take a recess to review these allegations privately," he murmured. But Jackson wasn't listening. He was staring at me, his expression a mixture of shock and growing anger. "You had no right to investigate me," he hissed. "How did you even know where to look? You don't understand anything about finance." "Actually," I replied, speaking for the first time, my voice steady, "I understand quite a lot more than you gave me credit for. For instance, I understand that inherited assets are generally considered separate property under Massachusetts law, even when used to purchase jointly titled property." His brow furrowed in confusion, then cleared as comprehension dawned. "The house," he said flatly. "Yes, the house," Lauren confirmed. "Purchased with Mrs. Pierce's inheritance from her grandmother. While the deed is in both names, 67% of the purchase price came directly from Mrs. Pierce's inherited funds, which we have thoroughly documented. Under Massachusetts law, that portion of the home's value remains her separate property." Jackson's phone began buzzing incessantly. He glanced at it, his face darkening further. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, though his confidence was clearly shaken. "You can't prove anything about financial misconduct. It was my right to manage our investments as I saw fit." "Managing investments is one thing," Lauren replied. "Forging your wife's signature on a second mortgage and transfer documents is quite another. The forensic handwriting analysis is included in the appendix." As if on cue, Jackson's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, then abruptly stood up. "I need to take this," he muttered, stepping out of the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see him engaged in an intense conversation, gesticulating angrily. His attorney used the opportunity to flip through the documentation we had provided, his expression growing grimmer with each page. When Jackson returned, his face was ashen. "Amanda's left," he said, seemingly to himself, rather than addressing anyone in the room. "She's cleared out the condo and taken everything, including the new car I bought her." In that moment, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for the wreckage of what had once been my life. But I also felt strength flowing through me, the strength that comes from facing your worst fear and finding yourself still standing. The meeting continued, with Jackson growing increasingly agitated as more evidence was presented. The forensic financial investigation had revealed not only the diversion of our joint funds, but also hidden accounts and investments Jackson had been maintaining for years. His attorney kept attempting to call for recesses, clearly alarmed by the mounting evidence and Jackson's deteriorating composure. 2 weeks later, we appeared before Judge Eleanor Simmons, a no-nonsense jurist known for her low tolerance for financial shenanigans in divorce cases. By this point, Jackson's attorney had advised him to settle quickly and quietly, but Jackson's pride wouldn't allow it. He still believed he could charm or intimidate his way out of the situation. That illusion shattered when Judge Simmons reviewed the evidence package Lauren had submitted. Her expression grew increasingly severe as she flipped through the documentation of Jackson's financial maneuvers, the forged signatures, the hidden assets, and the explicit messages proving his infidelity. "Mr. Pierce," she said finally, looking at Jackson over her reading glasses, "in my 23 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant attempt to defraud a spouse of their rightful assets. The court finds your actions both legally actionable and morally reprehensible." The judge's ruling was comprehensive and decisive. Not only was I awarded the house outright, but Jackson was ordered to repay the entire amount he had withdrawn from our joint accounts, plus interest and penalties. The investment properties, including the Miami condo, which Amanda had abandoned, taking only the furnishings and personal items, were to be liquidated with the proceeds divided according to the source of funds used for purchase, which meant I would receive approximately 70% of the total. Most satisfyingly, Judge Simmons referred the evidence of Jackson's financial misconduct to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to the forgery of my signature on legal documents. While I had no desire to see Jackson imprisoned, the referral sent a clear message about the seriousness of his actions. As we left the courtroom, Jackson attempted to approach me one last time. Gone was the arrogance, replaced by desperation. "Ivy, please," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We can work this out. I made a mistake. Amanda's gone, took half the money and ran off with her ex-boyfriend. I was an idiot. We had a good life together. We can have that again." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the charming, confident man I had fallen in love with, but a shallow, selfish person who had been wearing a mask our entire relationship. In that moment, any lingering doubt or regret dissipated. "Goodbye, Jackson," I said, simply turning away from him and walking toward the future I would build for myself. Later that day, I received an email from him, a pathetic attempt to salvage his pride, alternating between blaming me for driving him to infidelity and begging for another chance. I didn't respond. Some chapter endings don't require further discussion. What Jackson never understood, even at the end, was that his greatest mistake wasn't the affair or even the financial deception. It was underestimating the woman he had married. In his mind, I was the supportive wife who handled the social calendar and looked pretty at his side during business dinners, not someone capable of outmaneuvering him at his own game. That fundamental misreading of my character was what ultimately cost him everything. The final divorce decree was signed on a bright autumn day, almost exactly 6 months after Jackson's text message. As I left the courthouse, legal documents in hand, the symbolic timing wasn't lost on me. One complete season had passed, a spring and summer of upheaval and challenge, and now, as leaves turned golden and the air grew crisp, I was officially beginning a new chapter. In the months following the judge's ruling, I received periodic updates about Jackson's situation, though I never sought them out. Boston's financial community is surprisingly small, and word travels fast. Amanda had indeed left him when the money started running low, apparently reconnecting with an ex-boyfriend and taking a significant portion of the cash Jackson had withdrawn from our accounts. The Miami condo, which had been ordered sold as part of the divorce settlement, sat empty, while Jackson desperately tried to find a buyer in a suddenly cooling market. Most telling was learning that Jackson had been forced to move in with a college friend, sleeping on a futon in a spare room while struggling to rebuild his career. His firm had placed him on leave pending investigation when news of the divorce proceedings and financial improprieties became public. His professional reputation, built on trust and financial acumen, was in tatters. A week after the final decree, I received what would be Jackson's last communication, an email so filled with self-pity and desperate pleas for reconciliation that it would have been pathetic if it weren't so infuriating. He claimed to have learned his lesson, to have changed fundamentally, to finally understand what really matters. I read it once, then deleted it without response. Some bridges once burned should remain ashes. The emotional healing process was far more challenging than the legal victory. For weeks after Jackson left, I would wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, reliving the moment I read his cruel text message. The casual brutality of it, the clear intent to hurt and humiliate me, revealed a capacity for cruelty I hadn't recognized in the man I had shared my life with for 8 years. My support system proved invaluable during this time. Monica came over regularly sometimes just to sit with me in silence when words seemed inadequate. My sister flew in from California for 2 weeks, filling the house with her warmth and practical energy. My parents, though physically distant, called daily with words of encouragement and love. Perhaps most surprising was the support from Jackson's parents. They reached out repeatedly, making it clear that they considered his behaviour unforgivable and that they still considered me family. Their integrity in that difficult situation moved me deeply. 3 months after Jackson left, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Bennett. Our weekly sessions became a sanctuary where I could process not only the trauma of betrayal, but also the subtle patterns of emotional manipulation that had characterized my marriage for years without my fully recognizing it. What Jackson did was financial abuse, Dr. Bennett explained during an early session. By controlling all financial information and decisions, by dismissing your questions and concerns, he was systematically disempowering you. That's a form of domestic abuse, even without physical violence. Those words were difficult to hear, but also liberating. They helped me understand that the breakdown of my marriage wasn't a failure on my part, but rather the result of a fundamental imbalance that had been present from the beginning. As part of my healing process, I reclaimed physical spaces as well as emotional ones. I renovated our bedroom first, replacing the furniture, repainting the walls, changing everything that reminded me of Jackson. What had been his home office became a bright yoga and meditation room. The formal living room we had rarely used was transformed into a cozy library filled with books I'd always wanted to read, but had never made time for. Professionally, I continued to advance. 6 months after Jackson's departure, I was offered a director position at my company, a significant promotion that would have been impossible to accept during my marriage, as Jackson had always resisted any career move that might require more of my time or attention. I accepted it without hesitation. New friendships entered my life as I began to engage with the world as an individual rather than as half of a couple. I joined a hiking group, started taking photography classes, and volunteered at a women's financial literacy program inspired by my own experience. Through these activities, I built connections based on shared interests and values rather than the superficial social circles Jackson had preferred. A year after the divorce was finalized, I attended a marketing conference in Chicago. During a networking lunch, I found myself seated next to David, an old college acquaintance I hadn't seen in over a decade. He was now a creative director at a major agency, divorced himself with a warmth and self-deprecating humor that put me immediately at ease. We exchanged business cards, and later that week he emailed to ask if I'd be interested in having dinner the next time either of us was in the other's city. 2 months later, when work brought him to Boston, we had that dinner. The conversation flowed easily, touching on careers, books, travel, and eventually our respective divorces. There was no pressure, no agenda, just the comfortable connection of two people with shared experiences and perspectives. When he asked if he could see me again during his next visit to Boston, I said yes without hesitation or anxiety. Dating again after divorce was both terrifying and exhilarating. With David, and later with others, I established boundaries that would have been unthinkable during my marriage to Jackson. I was clear about my need for financial transparency and independence. I watched carefully for red flags I would have previously ignored, and most importantly, I trusted my instincts in a way I had trained myself not to during my years with Jackson. The greatest lesson from my experience wasn't about the importance of financial independence, though that was certainly significant. It was about recognizing my own worth and strength. Jackson had systematically undermined my confidence, making me believe I needed him to navigate the complexities of adult life. The discovery that I could not only survive without him, but actually thrive, was the most powerful outcome of his betrayal. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes from facing your worst fear and finding it survivable. After Jackson left, I discovered that the life I had feared losing was actually preventing me from living authentically. The beautiful home, the social status, the apparent security all of it had come at the cost of my autonomy and self-respect. As for Jackson, I heard through mutual acquaintances that his downward spiral continued. He lost his professional licenses due to the financial misconduct evidence that emerged during our divorce proceedings. The last update I received indicated he had moved back to Chicago, working at his uncle's insurance agency, a far cry from his prestigious position in wealth management. The man who had been so concerned with status and appearance had lost both completely. I don't share this outcome with any sense of triumph or vindication. Jackson's choices and their consequences are his own, just as my resilience and rebuilding belong to me. If there's a moral to this story, perhaps it's that true security comes not from controlling others or accumulating wealth, but from knowing your own worth and protecting it fiercely. Life after betrayal isn't a straight line to healing. There are still days when anger resurfaces, when trust feels impossible, when the echo of that devastating text message reverberates in my mind. But those days grow fewer as time passes, and the life I've built in their wake is more authentic and fulfilling than what came before. If you're facing betrayal or loss right now, know that the initial devastation doesn't define your story's ending. Sometimes the text message you think is ending your life is actually the beginning of a more authentic one. Trust yourself, protect yourself, and remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal or what steps you've taken to maintain financial independence in your relationships. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and recovery, and share this video with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength today. Thank you for listening to my journey.